All right, so I'm just going to keep the Jeep riding. I've decided to allocate Sundays for specifically creating some kind of content to put out there. Every week on Sundays, I'll be making content. Anyways, I don't know that this is going to be a double upload day. I might stagger them out, but we'll see what happens. So, anyways, in continuing with this tattoo stories series that I'm doing, I've kind of fallen into this beat with these videos where I'm basically giving an autobiography with how I got into tattooing, along with just like funny shit that's happened at each of the tattoo shops that I've worked at. This one is going to be on the longer side since several incidents that occurred at the shop where I happened to work the longest. So this video may get broken into two parts. Um, so after I stopped working at the third shop that I apprenticed at, I thought I had shit figured out well enough to try to do some tattoos at the pad on my friends. And of course, it goes without saying that most of these tattoos came out pretty fucked off since I was not doing them under the watchful eye of my mentor. But at this point, I had done at least a few tattoos and I was somewhat content with how they came out, and I had figured out that I wanted to work in the traditional style since those were the tattoos that I had done. Those were the ones that I was the most happy with. So at this point, I'm acquiring books, I'm drawing my own designs. So yeah, I just started marketing myself and trying to do it that way, building a personal brand. So I was keeping in contact with all my mentors, with the exception of the one whose girlfriend almost got shot over the weed. So, link will be in the description for the story on that for those that haven't seen it. But anyway, so at this point, having also seen where my work was at, my second mentor reached out and asked if I wanted to come work with him. So, I wasn't. This was now the third or fourth shop that I was working at, and I wasn't there as an apprentice for very long. I pretty much got thrown to the wolves, as they say, just tattooing little Pinterest stuff on walk-ins. So my mentor there, who didn't even end up staying at that shop with me for very long, he eventually moved to Galveston, and he was working at a shop on the seawall, but I stayed at the shop in Fort Worth. So I was given a station in the back in a somewhat large room that I shared with the owner of the shop. And yeah, so we were just back there doing little tats. He was usually pretty booked up doing his realism tats, and I was just back there taking little walk-ins and stuff, just anything that was approachable enough for me to be able to do in my lack of experience. So there was one night where he was tattooing this lady whose old man showed up in the middle of the tattoo and basically ruined her shot at getting her tattoo finished. So I guess they were on the rocks or something because this dude was extremely uncomfortable with her getting tattooed. I don't know what that had to do with my boss. I don't know if maybe there was some kind of insecurity that was being directed at my boss at the time, but he was not down. This dude, the lady's old man, was not down with her getting tattooed. So I don't even really know what was going on when he pulled up and asked for the owner by name. I was sitting out front on there was like a porch kind of deal, so I was just sitting out there, had the phone in my pocket, just ready to take a walk in. So he came in, asked for my boss, and I just told him that he was in the back working on a tattoo, not knowing that the dude was going to just walk right in and cause a scene in the middle of the tattoo session. So I think at first they got him to wait outside, but he eventually came back inside and started yelling again. So I guess my boss had gotten enough of it because he told the chick he was not going to be able to finish the tattoo with that dude causing problems and that she needed to get him to leave. And I seem to recall her just going with him. So, and I'm sure that my fellow tattooers have dealt with that of some sort, some situation like that, whether it's a insecure boyfriend that's wanting to be overly involved, or whether it's an insecure girlfriend, or just a dude who cares way too much about the girlfriend's opinion on what he's getting tattooed. So That's definitely an element within tattooing that I'm sure many can relate to. So the shop wasn't like the most ghetto, but there were times when it was pretty bad. I think there was at least once I took an amount of time off from tattooing because I came back after a couple months, and up to this point, with it being a cash only shop, we didn't even have an ATM in the building, and people would end up just leaving without paying, saying that they needed to run across the street to get cash from the bank and then just not returning. Um, there was I can't remember if it was Walgreens or CVS next to the bank across the street, and on one it was a really slow day, but it was really hot outside. Um, we had this piercer at the time. He was the most not typical piercer that I've ever worked with at a tattoo shop, but he drove a big truck and like a big pickup. So we threw a tarp in the back of his truck and then drove his truck across the street to that CVS or Walgreens, and they had like a hose in the back of it. I don't really know what they used it for, but there was a hose back there. So we just pulled up in the truck and put that hose in the back of his truck and filled the back of his truck up with water, and then basically just had this like little redneck swimming pool parked in the front of the shop, and we were just hanging out waiting for walk-ins, hanging out in the little redneck swimming pool. So that was pretty tight. We actually had an array of different piercers that worked there in the time that I worked there, and they all like fulfilled different little like weird piercer archetypes. The guy I was talking about before, I think I want to say he was like an ex-marine or something like that, like definitely like ex-armed forces, ex-infantry, something like that. And again, he was just nowhere near any kind of a stereotype I maintain in my head of like what a piercer could or should be. He didn't have a blackout sleeve. Didn't I think like the only piercing he had was like an eyebrow and then like maybe his ears or something. I actually did piercings as well as tattoo at that shop, but there was another piercer dude that we had that had this weird tendency to want to act as like the shop owner's like enforcer, like he was some kind of mob boss or something. I remember he was just so like, I don't know, he just had this like kind of aggressive underlying vibe to like every situation that unfolded at that shop. I remember one time, this second dude that I'm talking about, he asked me to tattoo "fuck your feelings" across his forehead one day, and I don't know if I like turned him down or like brushed him off, or I think at the time I was probably just like super intimidated to like tattoo somebody's face, especially his face, because I didn't know what the fuck was gonna happen if I fucked up his face tat. But then he showed up the next day and had like gotten somebody to do it, so he was really about that specific tattoo. So another time, there was one day that I was booked to tattoo this like, it was like a kid and his stepmom. And I can't remember what the kid got tattooed because it was his first tattoo, relatively small and just super forgettable. But anyways, the lady I remember very specifically because she wanted to cover up on the side of her leg that ended up being around the size of like a hand, maybe a little bit longer. You might consider it to be a medium-sized tattoo. But what we decided on was a feather because it was like feminine and flowy, and it was more or less able to have like the darks and lights everywhere that they needed to be to achieve this cover up. I like to mention this particular story to clients based on two specific prompts, because one of those prompts being the whole like the premise of dressing accordingly for your tattoo, because in this case the woman was not adequately prepared. And I think that it could be due partially to the fact that where that shop was, I think a lot of the time in that specific area of Fort Worth, the stockyards, you get a lot of people that are just kind of there for whatever reason, and then like getting tattooed comes as like an afterthought. Um, so it was relatively common that you'd get people that want to get certain parts of their body tattooed, and they have not done the due diligence to make sure that they're going to be able to have that part of their body be accessible without having to compromise themselves in one way or another. So she wasn't very adequately prepared on that specific front. And then a lot of the time too, and this is another thing that's relevant to this specific story, but sometimes you'll get clients that apologize for whatever like bodily smell they might be self-conscious about, whether it's like their feet or their armpits or whatever. And again, like, these things can be alleviated with proper preparation. um yeah, I mean, like, if you can go take a shower or whatever you need to do. But anyways, so, and then I'll say this in the spirit of professionalism, and I don't know this with certainty, but I do not believe that this woman was wearing the most substantial underwear. And I know that, just stand by, like, that's a super weird thing to say, and I will explain the relevance of that momentarily. But she was wearing a sundress, and as awful as that sounds, it's not my business. It wasn't relevant to me. Like, it shouldn't have been made my business. Like, I should have not ever been preoccupied with like what underwear she was wearing. But so I mentioned the kid. I mentioned what I'm assuming was the stepmom, because the age gap between these two individuals, obviously the kid was old enough to be getting tattooed. The stepmom did not seem old enough to be that kid's mother. So the kid's dad, who was also with them, between the stepmom and the dad, they were pushing me to the limits of my comfort and professionalism. So, and I think it's a lot. I do think that that's saying a lot, considering at this time, at least, especially, I've been known to generally tolerate a lot of like extracurricular fucking nonsense bullshit in the process of trying to put a tattoo on somebody. Like, I've always emphasized like customer care. A little bit of like a customer service personality goes so far in tattooing. But with that being said, this couple was being a lot, and I eventually had to tell the husband to wait in the lobby, because he kept like pulling her dress up while I was in the middle of doing her tattoo, and like touching her in like weird ways that was like just super awkward to do while I'm in the middle of trying to put a tattoo on her. So, I kind of had to buck up and tell him to get out, which was like, especially at the time, very out of character for me. So I don't know what it is about like new couples approaching or being in the throes of middle age, but in my experience, they tend to be like this, like very prone to PDA in a way that like they do not give a shit about anybody else's feelings about it. Like, it's like a weird thing, because teach their own, like, do what you're gonna do. But it's like, whenever I'm sitting here trying to put a tattoo on you, it's not the time to be like trying to finger bang each other. I might have to bleep that out. I might have to do some homework and see what YouTube will tolerate in terms of that. But anyways, so it's always middle-aged couples that want to do this. And I wouldn't say that she was middle-aged, but it was just like this weird vibe from like the middle-aged dad. Like, it was like he was trying to flex on me or something. Like, and I ran into this numerous times, and I think there's another story on at a later time. I've got another story of another couple acting like this, and it's always wild, and I never really know how to act. But yeah, okay, so I've got another story of this nature that I'll tell in one of my next couple of videos, but it happens later on down the timeline. So anyways, as I'm getting further along in this tattoo, I've got to run a pretty long, like, seamless line in this feather tattoo. It's like I don't know if you'd call it a stem, but like it's just the middle part of the feather. So it's like a long line that I need to get pretty perfect. So in order to do this, I kind of have to like position myself closer, like, to her body, like my body closer to her body than it otherwise had been for most of this tattoo. So, as I'm like positioning myself, like I'm actually in the middle of running one of these two lines that forms this S-shaped flowy stem to the feather. But as I'm doing this, I feel this like kind of subtle vibration come from her, and then the accompanying smell of what became obviously a very poorly timed fart. Um, this woman had just farted with me being so close to her that I felt the vibration of it on my shoulder. Also, and I think this is the main reason it became relevant, like that she was wearing like very little clothing in this part of her body, because it was like there was no buffer. So, I mean, like it's basically the next thing to her fucking doing a bare ass fart on my shoulder. So, after that, and I like to tell this story when when people apologize to me about like, oh, my feet stink, whatever. It's like, you know what? You're not doing a bare ass fart on my shoulder, like. And so any after that, like, I will tolerate most any kind of bodily smell within reason, but I mean that was the worst. So, all right, so finally, this is the last story I'm going to get to on this video. Obviously there are numerous gross things that I can recall having happened at this shop. um, but this one is just head and shoulders above the rest, and I even have photographic evidence. So I'll be working this way. This somewhere on the screen. There's going to be some pictures that I'm going to put in here. Um, but anyways, yeah, this one has photographic evidence. One day, my boss at this shop, he was booked to start a Marvel themed leg sleeve. It's weird we call them leg sleeves and not socks, but whatever. On a gentleman that was going to start with a baby Groot holding a Captain America's shield on his leg. This dude showed up to the shop, and nothing really noteworthy happened through the whole paperwork process. At this time, I don't know that we did the whole like official graduation thing, or if it just kind of slowly transitioned to. I don't remember how the timeline worked out, but for a long time, I would still like if I was there, I was hanging out behind the counter, helping people with their paperwork, um, doing the cleaning, showing up early, leaving late, all that. So at this point in time, I was the person who handled his paperwork. Nothing weird happened. We are supposed to make sure that there's nothing weird going on with someone. I don't want to give away the story here, but there's certain behaviors that a person might exhibit that might affect their eligibility for getting tattooed, but he didn't give any of those telltale signs. So I guess at some point between when I interacted with him, got his paperwork done, and when the drawing was done and the stencil was put on him, he had found the opportunity to go to his truck and start slamming shots of Fireball. Um, and it will become clear later how I knew that what he had been drinking was Fireball. But I'm assuming he had to take several breaks throughout the course of his 5-hour session, because as you will have already seen in the picture if I posted it, I don't know when, I don't want to give the story away too early, but anyways, as you'll see in the picture, he did not get that much tattooing done in this amount of time, having sat for 5 hours. But I also don't know when he found an opportunity to get as drunk as he later turned out to be. He eventually fell asleep, which I'm assuming my boss didn't take too much of an issue with, or maybe he stopped tattooing him. I don't know. But the guy fell asleep in the chair while getting tattooed. But after having fallen asleep, he started throwing up all over himself again while he was still asleep. So, and I remind you, at this point in time, I'm basically sharing one large station with my boss. So to tell you that the smell was awful would be an understatement. That room that we shared, it smelled simultaneously like cinnamon and chili cheese bugles. Um, and that's how I knew that it had been Fireball. And then we had a vending machine in the lobby, so I'm assuming that's where he sourced his chili cheese bugles from. Um, Obviously, this ended the tattoo session for the day, but there was an amount of time, of course, after having made sure he wasn't going to drown in his vomit or anything, that the dude just sat in the chair, completely passed out. We had no idea what to do, which is when I got the opportunity to take the picture that you will surely, by this point, have seen. So, I think we eventually were able to get him woke up and called himself a ride, but as far as I know, probably out of embarrassment, he never ended up coming back and getting his tattoo finished. Um, it may be fucked up that I took a picture of him, but I think because of the fact that I was pretty much the person that had to clean up all the mess, it's I think it's fair. There's balance in that. So yeah. So that was probably the grossest thing that ever happened to me. I wasn't even the one doing the tattoo, but in when people talk about like, oh, I'm sorry for this or oh, I'm sorry for that. It's like, well, you didn't fart on me. You didn't throw up in my station. There's a really good story that I've seen make the rounds on social media about the poop rock. So if you know, but this is as close as I get to my poop rock story. And unfortunately, I don't have any souvenirs of the experience other than the picture that I took. So anyways, that's all I've got for this one. If you've watched this far, I appreciate you guys for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. We'll have some more uploads coming soon. See you.